Morning, everyone. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I hope you can hear me well and see the screen. Currently, I'm sharing a screen with the PowerPoint slide that is titled Creating Change with Conservation Games. I started this career over at the University of Oxford while teaching using my own created games. Let's begin with a short story of mine. Indeed, I did my PhD over at the University of Oxford, and you can see here two familiar creatures that you might find in Malaysia: the red jungle fowl, which is kampong chicken, as well as the fruit fly, Melanogaster drosophila. Drosophila melanogaster, and these are two tropical species. I was studying the sexual interactions of the two species, particularly how the sexual dynamics are modulated by sibling interactions, such as when there's a group of males, would two brothers help one another and compete against others that are not related? While doing my PhD, I was quite interested in outreach, showcasing the research that we do as researchers through the platform of dance. As such, I've recorded dance videos on same-sex behavior in animals, ones that feature unique sexual strategies such as hanging out with less attractive friends so as to make yourself more attractive. And the third video that you see on the right is about sperm competition in the red jungle fowl. Along the way, I was also teaching, so I created some games that will feature ecology, such as EcoDevo, and this will feature the UK diversity, and you can create a food map or destroy it according to your own will. And another game that is created for RSPO, the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil. And in this game, farmers would understand the procedure needed for RSPO certification. After a few years, I stepped back into conservation, where my true passion lies, and I joined the Wildlife Conservation Research Unit over at the University of Oxford, in short, Wild Crew. Before I elaborate on my journey in conservation, I would love to hear from you what you think about conservation and games in general. So we'll have a short polling session right now, facilitated by my co-host. And here we're going to hear from you to what extent you agree to some statements. And there's just 3 statements here. Let's hear from you. To what extent do you agree with? First, I find it challenging to convince my friends and family about the importance of conservation. So you see a poll popping out in front of you. I'd like you to select whichever you think it's agreeable to you, whether you strongly disagree or strongly agree to the statement. So once you've submitted, our co-host would share our results. And let's see how our peers have voted on this topic. Okay, let's see what you have voted on. I find it challenging to convince my friends and family about the importance of conservation. Conservation, when we speak about it, is about the protection of wildlife. And you can see quite prevalently, agree has obtained about 60% of the votes. This is interesting. Personally, I too find it challenging. I grew up in Singapore. I went to Oxford for 12 years, and people around me, yes, they understand maybe wildlife, it's important to conserve, But sometimes when we see their practices such as taking single-use plastics or driving cars to places that are convenient and accessible by public transport, then we find it a little bit frustrating perhaps and try to talk them out of it. Let's hear from you on our second statement. Conservation is a serious conversation. Let's elicit the poll again and see what you think about this. Is it a serious subject, or is it all fun and play and only do it when we have time? Of course, the statement is up to your own interpretation. Okay, let's see what we have voted on. All right, you can see the poll is being shared at this moment, and many of you agree or strongly agree to this statement. I know here we are all attracted by the topic on gamification, yet because conservation is one way of gamifying the subject, okay? So we want to see, okay, what's your perspective of conservation and whether it's a serious subject or not. And many indeed agree or strongly agree that conservation is a serious conversation. So maybe we need to speak to policymakers and teach people about it, reach out to the public and tell them, hey, you shouldn't do this, hey, you should do this, care more for the environment. All right, let's hear from you, our final statement, which pertains more closely to your hearts. Games are more for fun than for learning. So this is a preference or a more for fun than for learning. I'm also submitting my personal opinion. Of course, I have views on this three statements as well. So love to hear from you. Most of us love games, and indeed some people think I am a gamer. I play lots of games. In fact, that's not quite true. I'm not quite a gamer. I use games to teach. I love creating games. I don't really play games though, only with students. All right, let's share our poll and see what generally people think about this. I strongly disagree on this statement, and here we have more of a kind of divided view, I would say. You can see quite a few people have voted disagree and others have voted agree or strongly agree. So one can see that maybe games are more for fun for others, while others think games can be used for other purposes, such as motivation or learning. All right, thanks for sharing. Indeed, it's good to know what you think, okay, on a seminar that it has a large audience, and it will help me guide the rest of my seminar over here. I would like to share with you my journey in Oxford. And in Oxford, we have this very iconic event called a formal dinner, where we are invited to a 3 to 5 courses meal in the evenings at a place that is very full of ambience, and it's very much like what you see in the dining hall of Harry Potter. Yes, Harry Potter indeed. If you have seen the movie, or you can imagine the rustic English hall that is full of candlelights, as you can see on the top right here. This is a picture of me and my students. And what we had was a memorable dinner where the students would graduate and have this very lovely dinner. So very often than not, I would invite a guest over. And this is my ex-student from a diploma course. And she was invited to one of my dinners over in the hall that we went to the rooftop and we looked down and you can see all the plates and the lights. And if you ever had the chance, please do visit Oxford and go to this college called Christchurch, where the first Harry Potter scene was filmed in the dining hall and some of the other places. It's very, very beautiful. And so what happens if I invite a guest, and usually there will be other guests around, and what they would do, they might turn to my guest and ask, what do you do? And it means asking about what do you do for a living, or what do you study? And guests, sometimes they will say, I study cancer, I study biomedical sciences, I study physics and how planets move, or black holes. And responses would range. And wow, that's really interesting. That's really noble, because you are helping humanity. And it's important to recognize, yes, indeed, such subjects are very impactful for humanity and for the welfare of our fellow human beings. And they would turn to me, which is an interesting one, because there's an intrinsic bias here, and this must be your guest here. And this is assuming that I was the guest and not the host, because I was often the non-Caucasian person around. And they would turn to me, and this must be your guest here. What do you do? And I would say, I study wildlife and teach people about wildlife using games. And so then the response will be, oh, that must be fun. It's like, oh, I have too much maybe time on my hands, or my research might not be impactful. We don't really know what the implicit bias underlying this statement might be, but you can see the responses might differ depending on your discipline. And back in Singapore, or maybe in Malaysia, we have statements such as, that's not a real job being uttered to me when I study wildlife, go into the forest, or teach people using games. It doesn't seem to others that it might be a job per se, or I'm just doing it for fun. Another statement I've heard quite often, plastics are part of everyday life here. We have no choice. The government doesn't do anything about it. And this is often the idea of, we have no choice. We can't do anything much. And using the externalization principle of seeing what are the reasons for it, when we can actually do something about it, even at an individual basis. Others include, I don't understand why you might want to go to the forest. There's so many mosquitoes out there. Indeed, the educational system in Singapore, while I was growing up there, does not really expose me very much to the forest. And as such, we lose the connection with nature. It's really unfortunate. And when I tell people about my games and how I use it for education, there are statements like, are you sure the students are learning anything from your games? They are just, you are just making them happy with chocolates. And this was indeed uttered by one of my colleagues, and he was quite skeptical about what I do. And maybe this kind of inspired me to do some research on this particular subject. And other humorous remarks include, so you wait in the forest for clouded leopards and jump on them and take sperm. well, I don't. We deploy camera traps in the forest, okay, to take photos of the clouded leopard. Where this statement comes from, I'm not quite sure, but it might be from my PhD, where I was studying the sexual behavior of the red jungle fowl, and one of my frequently used procedure was to obtain sperm from the chickens and using the sperm for artificial insemination or looking at sperm quality. So they might have been confused as to what I was doing with clouded leopards in the forest. So just a brief about what my research is. For the conservation dimension, I look at large mammals and where they roam about in peninsular Malaysia. I have also some topics, some papers in the Amazon, in China, and so there's a range. And the idea here is to collate large data set on mammals and bring them together and mapping out favorable habitats for these creatures. On the left, you can see Peninsular Malaysia and the blue dots highlighting preferable habitats for the clouded leopard. The darker blue means more favorable habitat. And those in greens, the small little shapes in greens, are the ecological linkages that have been mapped out to connect the remaining forests. To do this, we collated the data set from multiple organizations such as Malaysian Conservation Alliance for Tigers, MyCat in short, WWF, MEME, which is Management and Ecology of Malaysian Elephants, and the Wildlife Department, Perhimpunan Earth Lodge, which is an eco-tourist site. And we collated data set on these several sites in Peninsular Malaysia, because organizations, sometimes they are focused on elephants or tigers, and they might not crosstalk with one another. And in order to look at regional wide, okay, spatial distribution of species, one might need more than just one particular site. So we map out the predicted habitat use of clouded leopard throughout Peninsular Malaysia. And highlighted in red is the central forest spine, the last remaining forest, and the central forest spine is a master plan used to protect the rest of the forests in Peninsular Malaysia as they undergo threats from palm oil and poaching. Right now, we see that within the central forest spine, the blue are darker blue, meaning that's more favorable habitat. And indeed, we found that within the central forest spine, you have 11% higher probability of seeing a clouded leopard than any sites that is outside the red boundaries or outside the central forest spine. So indeed, the central forest spine is a protective coverage for the clouded leopard. Great. And this is my site in Ulu Muda, Kedah, okay, and it's quite near the boundary with Thailand. And Ulu Muda it is found quite near Thailand. One of my camera traps, if you walk 500 meters from it, it's actually going to land us in Thailand illegally, especially since we don't have the passport, which means that people from Thailand are able to enter the forest as well. And unfortunately, at Ulu Muda, this is a common site, large-scale logging, and logging also at near the river sites, which is actually not legal because there's a buffer zone, the buffer zone around the river that is not allowed for logging. And so it's quite unfortunate, and I would say also quite devastating for me personally. I recalled there are some occasions whereby after deploying the camera traps and going back after 6 months, I realized that, hey, this place used to be a forest, and where is the forest? In fact, everything has been logged, and it's quite saddening. And what I would see is there's no trees except for one. What is this tree, one single tree doing there? Well, it was actually holding on to my camera trap. And the loggers were aware of my research, and so they left it there very nicely for me to collect the camera trap before perhaps they cutting down that last remaining tree. Other than logging, due to increased demand for land for development, as well as oil palm plantation, you can see sites like this on the camera traps. And these are photos of illegal poaching ongoing. The people are holding on to rifles, and one might think they come from other countries like Thailand and Myanmar. There's some evidence to suggest as such, but I also believe there are some from Malaysia as well. And they come into the forest, they hunt the animals, and they sell them for bushmeat as well as their fur. So my paper was published in 2017, and I was thinking, okay, what's with the impact of the publication? We're going to tell the same story to our believers, people who already know this is a sad thing. There needs to be lots to be done, and they are already converted and convinced of the importance of conservation. So what can we do? This is where I took my idea forward. I worked with a videographer to create this outreach video. Let's look at this. And if we can't hear from the audio, please let me know. It might be lagging slightly, just letting you know. If it is, okay, you can still Google this on YouTube to have a look after this seminar. All right, I'm going to play it now.
I'm the neighbour that you never noticed. I'm the friend that helped and provided for you. Ulu Muda, that's my name. I'm the forest that gives life. But why have I been assaulted, stripped? Why have my companions, my wild family, had to flee at the sound of gunshot? Logging, construction, poaching. These intruders have forgotten that our fates are entwined. My fate today will be yours tomorrow. I'm the neighbour that you never noticed. I'm the friend that helped in silence. Now, my friend, I need your help to stop these brutal actions that threaten my life.
Narrated by David McDonald, the director of Wild Crew, we personified Ulu Muda to have a personality and reach out to the public, showing its importance and how it's under threat. So I worked with the Friends of Ulu Muda, which is a group of organizations that include MIM, WWF, to reach out to the public with this video and a Malay version of this video, which was broadcasted on national TV. This outreach short clip was coupled with a petition. And here we gained over 102,000 supporters or people who signed the petition and submitted it to the government. There were other things such as letters to perhilitan or letters to the state government, and we did our very best to try to get Ulu Muda protected and to stop logging. 6 months after all these were submitted, indeed we had news from the Star and other social media that there were no more logging in Ulu Muda. Was this the case, and is this the case of current situation? Well, I would say that logging has indeed decreased. There is still much to do, okay, as to trying to get the state, okay, to get money from the federal government so that they don't have to log their natural resources to obtain revenue. Also, we want Ulu Muda to be protected. So there's lots more to be done, but this is one big step in creating impact with research. Including this outreach, we created a game in wildlife conservation, the Wild Truth game, Global Carnivore Conservation, featuring 6 different sites across the entire world. And one of the sites is Peninsular Malaysia. And you as a researcher will go into Malaysia, into the UK, into the Zimbabwe, okay, to conserve the different iconic species, the lion, the clouded leopard, the water vole, the Ethiopian wolf, etc. So you can play this with a group of participants, and we have published about 30 of these board games for outreach over in the UK. So this leads on smoothly to one of my current subject of the past. Over the past 6 years, I would say, since 2014, we have created the wildlife conservation course. It's a gamified course that features, okay, serious games as well as a situation where there's a theme. As you can see the pictures here, okay, so in 2016, it was the murder mystery where the students will compete in a 2-week course to gather clues about who killed the last Singaporean tiger. Then we had in 2017, a course on superheroes where participants will compete against one another to gain superpowers to fight against the common villain in the final battle. In 2018, was a bit more whimsical and had the Harry Potter theme, and students were divided into houses based on their personality traits, and they will work with one another to gather spells, and the spells could be working together. And finally, in the final battle, which is the revision class, they will work against a common evil. And in 2019, one of the most enjoyable ones for me, we went to Rwanda and Philippines, and the theme was Game of Thrones. And in that, I worked with Noor Asna, a co-teacher of mine. And in this particular course, the students were divided into kingdoms. They were asked to gain military badges, upgrade themselves in ranks, and work with each other in the same kingdom to fight for the throne, the final throne. All right, just to hear from you, okay, a thought question, all right. This is another poll I'd like to hear from you. It's a true false one, very simple. A statement here: by incorporating serious games, we gamify the course. So the course in itself, okay, had serious games whereby we had certain games created for certain topics. So is this true or false? Just wanting to hear from you. Oh, I see quite a few of my alumni here. from the past course? Good to hear from you, Angelo. Hong and Asna is here as well. Awesome. Okay, so if you don't see the poll, it might be behind a window or behind the window that you're currently seeing. Nevertheless, let's see if we have voted more true or false on this particular statement. Let's share the results. Okay, great. No worries if you are unable to see the poll. You might be able to see the poll being shared. Okay, most or 71% have said it's true, while 29% is false. Okay, so here is the differentiation between games and gamification. Gamification is a process whereby we incorporate gamification elements or game elements such as badges, points, or leaderboards, okay, to a non-game context, such as the workplace or a course. And these are not games in particular, we just gamified it. And previously mentioned, the students will gain spells, will gain military badges, will upgrade their ranks or gain superpowers. All these are part of the point system to gamify the course. Serious games are games created for a non-game context. They are entity, okay, and we'll look at some examples later, like, for example, a game that teaches you how to save money, or a game that teaches you how to do statistical work. And these are serious games. They are used, okay, not only for fun, but for something else, for motivation, for learning. And so the statement here is actually false. By incorporating serious games, we are not actually gamifying the course. We're just having serious games. But the course is gamified by a different method with badges, with ranks, with points. These are serious games. And you can see on the top left, here's a conservation genetics casino where students are trained to manage their population of colorful chips. Imagine 5 different colors, each representing a resistance to a disease, just like in the COVID variant that is constantly evolving. Each color is a variant. And here, the students have to manage their population of endangered chips in order to survive in an environment that constantly have different events like disease or tsunami or environmental change and temperature rise, wiping out different colors. And students love these games because they learn to bet, as in a casino, but also they learn the whole bigger picture of why we need to have colorful and as large a population of chips. On the top right, we have a game that teaches about forest management, and the students are divided into roles such as conservation biologists, local people, urban population, government, and given a pristine forest, they will just each try to obtain their objective, such as the urban population will just build a city and screw the forest, or the government, they need to earn as much money as possible from this country. So the students really learn to negotiate. They can collaborate, or they really can compete against one another to meet their objective. On the bottom left, we have a camera trap game in which they deploy their camera traps in the forest. And depending on how well they design their camera trap grid, okay, it affects the reliability of their data in the end. And on the bottom right, we have a game on animal behavior where each team is a different species. And in this game, you either be eaten or eat others as you discover more about your species. So my research has shown that there are positive perceptions of students from these games. Here we see certain results showing 3 different types of lessons, one with no game, another with supplemental game, which is a game that has no relation to the topic itself. It is like answer a question and you move up on a snakes and ladder board. Serious games are related to the topic. As you can see from the example previously, okay, those are serious games. They teach a bigger fundamental topic in the game itself, and the game is highly related to the topic at hand. We have a tiered response in which they were more interested and enjoyed more in a session with serious games compared to one with no games. They were more motivated to learn in sessions where there were games compared to no games. And finally, they found that they applied their knowledge better in a session with serious games compared to the other 2 sessions. This is indeed very good. Games also were found to bond students. As you can see, they were asked to rate one another after the session in the team. Okay, so they were asked to rate their team members and how close they felt with their team members. And here we see that serious games help students compared to no games. And there were also more positive behaviors. Okay, here we see the rate of asking questions. There were no differences among the 3 lesson types. The rate of joyful behavior, however, was much higher in serious games, and this is defined as clapping, cheering, smiling, and laughing. And we have less frequency of distracted behavior such as sleeping, yawning, using the phones, and these have been recorded much less frequently in serious games compared to no games. Next, let's hear from you. What do you think about the learning? Students learn better with games, and this is a true-false question for you. Just love to hear from you from our poll. What do you think? They perceive to have applied their knowledge better in games. But have they really learned better with games? Make a wild guess. I know it's not easy, given that we don't really have the findings revealed. All right, let's hear from our audience and see what we've got. Okay, so 94% have selected true and 6% false. I need to give some context on this. Okay, if you look at the literature, I would say it depends. It depends on what type of games, really. Is it supplemental? Is it serious games? And also, it depends on whether it's online or face-to-face, but there is a divided set of results for this. Some show that games are distracted and games actually create poorer performance, and others, okay, show that games encourage learning and they perform better in their exams. In this particular research, okay, we showed through quizzes that there was no difference in learning. And you can see before the quiz score, okay, proportion correct is about 35%. And after the lesson, we look at the quiz score again. The questions are quite tough, okay, on average, maybe 55%. There was no difference in the increase. Maybe for supplemental games, there is not that much of a increase. The p-value or the statistical significance is not significant. So it's maybe close to significance, but it's not significant. So there may be a hint of supplemental games not performing as well. quite intuitively, supplemental games might be a bit distracting because it's not related to the topic. It elicits competition and might be a bit distracting. But serious games perform as well as no game, which is great. And this is reassuring. Not in the sense of being positive, but just reassuring that is as well as the no game session. In my upcoming paper, hopefully, games have been shown to improve social interactions and learning. And in this, it increased the interaction between group members. Even with no games, we allow students to interact with one another in discussions. And we saw that with games, there is an increased interaction, especially from students that are a bit more shy. It reduced the probability of top-down leadership by a single dominant person. This is very interesting finding because it means that games might be more inclusive, like explained earlier. Okay, the shyer students might contribute more rather than just a single person dominating the interactions. And this is complementary to what we have found. The higher one-to-one bonding and group bonding was found for games compared to no games. Group bonding meaning how they rate the entire group rather than one-to-one. And finally, we found that games also increase the similarity in learning scores, which means that the students were learning from one another, which is great. So there is potential for social learning with games. After the course, about more than a year, we asked students how have the gamified courses changed their work. And here we have one set of results contributed by Boon-Chin Ling from Monash University. She created the survey to ask all the 400 over students. And here we see, okay, positive changes. More dreams means much better and somewhat better, okay, how the course have made changes to their work, such as initiating change, giving ideas, opening to ideas, leading a group. It made them more confident in speaking out, in making a voice, in making changes, in communicating with others, in analyzing reports, preparing reports, completing tasks. Okay, and job performance has improved. And so these are the long-term impacts of the gamified course. The courses did bring out the best in people. They were asked to communicate, interact with one another, do lots of group performances, and the competition was indeed positive and not negative. And this is very reassuring and very nice to hear. Thank you for those who have contributed to this survey. So I brought the gamified environment also to my e-learning course, and hopefully next year over at University of Nottingham, we will have our first digitized wildlife conservation course in which the gamified course and serious games will be taken on to the virtual environment. Here are some pictures of what we have for our previous e-learning course. We asked students to create comic strips of what would go wrong if they did not have a proper experimental design. We had them creating a film crew to create their own communication video. We had a virtual tour of the Bodleian Library in Oxford and a talk on clouded leopards and webinars as well. And so there was some gamified elements in the e-learning course, not too much of serious games. Hopefully next year, we'll have some of those serious games online. And yes, indeed, we are working on digitization of those serious games into an online platform called Tabletop Simulator. And here's EcoDevo on the virtual world and Conservation Genetics Casino already in the virtual world, and it's led by Noor Asna and her company. So I'm looking forward to this, and we're going to play on the virtual world, and hopefully I'll see a lot of you there. Another of my project is a gamified theater. An interactive player experience. This was started in Oxford, and in this, we were all actors, showcasing the life of the clouded leopard in Peninsular Malaysia. This theatre was performed at science festivals in the UK, and here, the uniqueness is that it's a choose your own adventure theatre. Imagine your childhood, or maybe you have experienced the choose your own adventure book when you were younger, okay, where you make your own decisions and it leads to different outcomes. In this theater, indeed, the audience were asked to make decisions for the actors, difficult ones, I must say, controversial ones. And sometimes you have so much of a divided vote among the audience. So this adventure starts off with wood harvesting, and the question of the logger, oh no, my trees are not growing fast enough. Should I stop harvesting? Okay, or continue harvesting? And the audience will ask to vote, and we would make a decision based on the majority. If they stop harvesting, then the local person loses their job because they are the logger, and the local might need to choose to stay in the forest or leave the forest to go to the city in order to meet ends meet. If they continue harvesting, trees get smaller and they can continue to harvest, or they sacrifice the forest to convert it to oil palm to gain revenue for to spare the rest of the forest. And so all these decisions, okay, lead to different outcomes. If the local stays in the forest, they encounter the clouded leopard and catches the clouded leopard. So the local is asked to decide whether to sell the clouded leopard to a bypassing tourist, or the tourist is not to buy the clouded leopard. If the local chooses to leave the forest, then the government decides to develop the land. Hey, no more locals. Yes, let's develop the land. And if the forest gets harvested to depletion, then how do we make money? Well, we have to kind of develop the land. And if they chose to do otherwise, they might go for ecotourism. And then there are 5 different outcomes here. Okay, I won't go through in details. Okay, but the outcomes are perpetuation of illegal wildlife trade. The local gets arrested if the tourist buys the clouded leopard. Development results in rich people, sad animals, ecotourism, poor people, happy animals, and conversion to oil palm, just as in Indonesia, okay, might lead to urban forests, because that's the easiest way of removing the remaining forest to clear land for oil palm plantation. So we wanted to do research on this. At the beginning, we framed the message differently. There were 4 different types of message divided into why or how we do wood harvesting, or gain versus loss wood harvesting. So gain is more positively framed, such as if we cut down the forest, we will be able to provide furniture for you in the UK. The loss one is more negatively framed. If we do not have forest logging, then we will not have paper and furniture for you in the UK. Sounds a bit more negative. And so we altered the message at the beginning, and we wanted to see how that changed the voting process or the decision-making process of the audience. We performed the message, the theater, multiple times, and here on the y-axis is the number of people, okay, voted to continue wood harvesting, weighted to the number of audience. Yes, each theater will have different number of audience. And we can see here, okay, the results are as such. We have 4 messages: gain, loss, why, or how. And we can see the only significant result here is that if we positively frame the message in a gain manner, if you cut down the forest, we have wood, we have paper for everyone. That's the gain message, okay, that encourage people to want to cut down the forest. The how and why message did not matter, okay, only the gain or loss. And we're not quite sure why, okay, maybe carrot driven, okay, and UK is more of a carrot driven society, okay, rather than a stick driven society. So maybe that's why we are able to alter the decisions. Interesting finding. The other question that we ask is that whether the ending affected your behavior intentions in the future. So some audience only saw the ending about wildlife trade, the pet trade, okay? And others saw the ending about development, oil palm plantation. And so we asked the audience at the end, after seeing your ending, okay, how likely is it that you will keep a clouded leopard as a pet? And you can vote for very unlikely to very likely. And we purposely put a cute picture of the clouded leopard here. Most people in the UK are unfamiliar with this species, so it's an ideal place to test this perception. Some people indeed choose very unlikely, okay? And then we have also another question, how likely are you to continue using products containing palm oil? And we have here, okay, very unlikely to likely. And so, okay, here, love to hear from you. Kids were more likely to keep clouded leopards as pets compared to adults. And let's pull up the true-false question and see what we think before I review the findings. Okay, so we're going to put up the poll. If the facilitator can help me with this, that would be great. Thank you. I don't see the poll at this moment, so it might not have come through. Maybe it needs some time for them to reset the poll. Okay, let's have a quick vote, whether you agree, whether this statement is true or false. Remember that clouded leopards are not a familiar species in the UK, so maybe it's going to be a neutral thing for adults and kids. Maybe kids are more likely, maybe adults are more likely. All right, just a couple more seconds because I'd love to share the results in a bit. And so, great, excellent. Let's share the results as to what we have. All right, 69% shows true. Okay, majority is right today. Okay, for this question, well done. And indeed, okay, we have kids more likely to keep clouded leopards than adults. And the theater path or the ending did not affect their probability of keeping clouded leopards as a pet. So ending did not matter. However, okay, we had about the oil palm products, and we have here, okay, interestingly, that adults, okay, were less likely to use oil palm products when they saw the oil palm ending. And so with the exposure to the ending, adults were thinking twice about using oil palm products in the future. And that's great because it is a subtle type of way of delivering our message. So participants also gave us insights into questions on oil palm, okay? And so we asked, what's the most important question you have after this conversation or after this theater? And one of the biggest questions was, what are the alternatives to oil palm? And so taking this forward, I'm working with the MIM, which is the Institute for Management and Ecology of Malaysian Elephants. And this is a choose your own adventure infographic that you can play as well on their online platform. Let's look at the teaser video. If you had to do this all over again and make a decision for the elephant, what would you have done? There are 3 different decisions for you to make, and it would lead to different outcomes. So stay tuned, okay, as we aim to deliver this to you, to the general audience, in end of December as a Christmas present, and we would like to investigate whether the ending affects your subsequent perception on elephant conservation. An ongoing project is the digital escape room, and right now it's currently ongoing, so I'm just not going to speak too much about it. It started off as a physical escape room over in Oxford with the National Geographic, and the idea here is to showcase what we do in the conservation world and how it affects you as individuals in your consumer behavior. The digital version has 2 messages, okay, delivered to 2 different set of audience. One, a negatively framed, be aware of your own actions. What we do on daily has impacts elsewhere. And another positively framed one, whereby we can do a lot for nature. And we want to see, okay, how this message intertwined with the digital escape room affects your behavior and perception on conservation. To end off, I would love to show you the teaser video. And if you are interested, feel free to get the QR code at the end and participate in our research. Okay, so take a screenshot or scan the QR code if you're interested and register to participate. If you're interested in this escape room, we have prizes to be won as well if you help us with our research, and great to have all of you gamers out there who are passionate about gaming. All right, just to end off, we had visited 3 important questions about whether it's challenging to convince families and friends, whether conservation is serious and games are more fun than for learning. And I would like to share my lessons learned. Nudging is an approach that can be effective in changing perception and behavior intention. And nudging is more subtle. It's not about telling, it's about having fun, showing, setting an example, showing consequences of actions in a world that is gamified. Another one, engaging can be made fun, and activities can be made fun. Engaging stimulate interest, and it's not always about changing ways. It could be just about enjoying it. And the message matters. It could be positive, negative, how, why, and this is part of my psychological research. And finally, in my games, I always incorporate elements of autonomy, freedom, okay, competence, relatedness, which is how you relate to the environment, to the elephants, to the people, to Ulu Muda. Aesthetics, like animation, colors, challenge, like replay, and novelty, something that changes along the way and something is different about it. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'm taking this forward to creating a virtual world in Minecraft. So stay tuned for next year as we create a field for which you can visit and play and learn about conservation. Thank you to all these people who have helped me and my funders, and I welcome any questions. I apologize that I had so much to share. We have one of the questions to tackle. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cedric, for the very insightful sharing. We have questions from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the questions is, how do we encourage the rural youth on forests and wildlife conservation?
Thank you for that. I have not worked on games for rural communities, but participants of my course have worked with local communities, and they have shared how they have created their own games. And it's amazing because they also do research on how the games have changed how they think about wildlife, like mitigating human-elephant conflict. So games can be another way of teaching people how they can manage their own lands and mitigate conflict with wildlife. So I encourage you to create your own games. If you're interested, feel free to contact me as well.